I suspected this ad might win, but I had no idea the jurors would respond to it as enthusiastically as they did. And My Hungry Caterpillar just swept, and it was a key. As a matter of fact, if you look at the chart, there's 2 circles at the top. There's only 1 sticky note at the top. We'd already booked the Masterclass speaker before all this happened. We didn't know, there's no relationship here. And I'm really glad that it worked out this way. We also have another special treat, and the company StoryToys is run by 2 brothers. The other brother is coming here. So, and it's Emmet's big brother, and that's Barry O'Neill. So it's Emmet and Barry O'Neill. When is he going to get here?
He should be here about an hour.
All right.
Just in time to miss my time.
Oh, that's really very convenient. Come up, please.
So, as Warren said, this was arranged some time ago, and Warren actually gave us the title 2 Apps, 1 Caterpillar. Well, we're actually, strictly speaking, now 3 apps. We had another one came out just last week, so we worked pretty quickly with StoryToys. So first off, I'm going to give you just a quick overview of who StoryToys is. So it's just a brief overview, but as you can see, we started out producing public domain IP apps. Then we moved on to original property, a mix of original property and licensed apps. So we've been making licensed apps for a little over a year, but in a former role, actually in Houghton Mifflin as their digital creative director, I oversaw all of the Curious George apps. Now, the Curious George apps were kind of an interesting one for me in that I have no affinity for the brand whatsoever. Growing up in Ireland, it's a very US-centric brand and very US-centric character. So it just didn't really resonate. So in working on the Curious George properties, I really enjoyed making the apps, and I remain really, really proud of them. But you can see a pretty common theme across all of them, that they were basically an app that I wanted to make that we stuck a monkey on top of. There's not a close relationship between character and content. We'd say, okay, we have a great idea for an app about shapes and colors, or a great idea for a zoo app, bring out the chimp, and stick them on the front of it, and they did very, very well. But as I said, it wasn't something that I had a deep personal affection for. So move on a year later, I'm working for StoryToys, and the opportunity to pitch for the Very Hungry Caterpillar license came up. Now that was a brand I was very, very familiar with, and had a deep, deep connection with. So that's me, that's my little sister Jodie, and that's Barry, my elder brother, as Warren so kindly pointed out. While I don't recall being read The Hungry Caterpillar as a child, I recall from my earliest memories it being a book in the house, and I recall sitting reading it with my sister, and I had a deep, close personal connection with the book. And then in the year 2000, my first son was born, and before we left the hospital, we had a copy of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. And when a couple of years later, with himself and his brother, every night I read, not just Very Hungry Caterpillar, but a lot of Emmet's other works. We Firefly, Red Ladybug, every night. Every night, probably for about 400 consecutive nights. So I guess what I loved about Eric's work was he always kind of actually pushed the boundaries of technology. You know, whether it was die cutting in print, or whether it was the fact that the Quiet Cricket book made a noise when you opened the end, or the Firefly book lit up. He was always kind of at the you know, that edge of technology. And I guess not only did he make technology focused books, but he also you know, there was content that resonated and very, very deeply and personally for me, and obviously for millions and millions of people around the world. So eventually we signed a deal with Eric Carl and Joe Sterloria Group on January 6, 2014. So this was really exciting. This was my first chance to work on licensed content that I had a deep connection with and genuinely loved. However, the app was due on the App Store March 20th. So, well, that seems almost a 3-month development cycle. I'm sure many of you would know you try and submit your app about 3 weeks before submission. There's maybe a little thing called sign-off involved. You got a concept. And so, in actuality, I think we probably had about 7 production weeks to create the app. This is that app.
How many of you were there?
Working on this app, there would have been a team of 4.
What, 2 developers?
There was, yes, 2 developers, 2 designers, and myself overseeing. So 5 technically. So I think what we did a good job of was bringing Eric's art style to life in an interactive way. But you know, it didn't go as far as I wanted. It wasn't quite the app that I hoped to make. There were 1 or 2 scenes in it that I genuinely, really felt we'd got somewhere with. But all in all, it was a bit of a disappointment to me. This is the first time the art of Eric Carl has been used in an app that you won't regret buying. High praise, Warren. So, you know, I think you clearly mastered when your mother told you if you don't have anything good to say. However, the bad news is that a few of the activities are shallow, and some an overly cheerful, overly chatty narrator might stand in the way of a curious child. It's fair comment. It still did okay. It became #1 education app in 20 countries. Not really the countries that you care about in terms of app revenue, but in the main ones that you would care about, it certainly hit top 10. So I mean, it was a very successful app. I guess more than anything, it was a personal disappointment. So what next? Well, we actually planned out a follow-up app that followed a very similar formula. And we got as far as designing out each of the games and working it through, but it just kind of felt like it was going to be more of the same and another letdown. And the thing is, it's obviously a print property, and these are pages from the style guide. And appropriately, there's a lot of things you can and cannot do, as there is in any print-based style guide for producing like t-shirts, etc. However, my kind of concern on it was, trying to totally destroy the flowers, that we weren't making a print product. We were effectively making a toy. And the thing is, with a toy, you can sort of do lots of things with it. I can flip it around, I can rotate it, and I can even animate it as a child. And I felt that our app needed to be able to do all of those things. So I pitched that translating the caterpillar from print to interactive is more analogous to making an actual physical toy than to recreating a print product in pixels. So it was my Magritte moment. Magritte argued this is not a pipe, but he also argued that this is a piece of cheese. And I guess the case I was trying to make was that these are all still the caterpillar. The caterpillar is so iconic that he can I guess, withstand translation across to other media in a very robust way. So we came up with this render and we did a little bit of animation and we pitched it to Motoko and her team. And we got a kind of the toy is a derivative of Eric's work, but is this a derivative of a derivative? Now that was a very, very fair point, because we got so excited about the technology and about the form factor that we weren't engaging with the point. It was effectively, I guess, as you mentioned AR earlier, it was effectively a technology gimmick looking for something to do. However, undeterred, we went ahead and produced the prototype. So this very simple prototype did one thing: tap anywhere, and you generate a piece of fruit. And the caterpillar would go over and eat it whole. We didn't have the development time to actually do the holes in the fruit at that point. And he'd get a little bit fatter, and then you'd make him run around more, and he'd get a little bit thinner. So we sent this across, and suddenly it was maybe. So that maybe, we did one more prototype. And this was, I guess, where we introduced a ball to make him thin again, get some exercise, some other interactive elements. And you could still give him food in here as well. So we produced this prototype, and at that point, the sort of feeling was, well, actually, that initial white space, that really feels like the very hungry caterpillar. Whereas this, it started to become constrained and confined. So we thought about it and it's like, well, how can we make something that has that open feel of the first prototype, but has more functionality than the ability to feed fruit to a caterpillar? But eventually, exactly last year at this festival, Motoko and I met up, and finally we reached agreement that this was an app that they wanted to make, and this was something that, this was a direction they were prepared to take the property. So I went back to Dublin, delighted with myself, and sat down and started sketching at my desk, as I usually do. So you can see things: Cecil, swing, dizzy, bubble, water on a leaf. It's a rambling list, but it actually contains quite a lot of what went into the app. Then we start drawing, and you can see again we were thinking about sleeping areas. We were thinking about different toys you could play with. We were thinking about other elements from Eric Carle's world that we could bring in, like the ladybug. And this went on for a little while. A lot of this would be working with the team, but a lot of it was also just, I'm a great believer in just sitting down with a blank piece of paper until you get somewhere. And you can see this actually pretty much plots out the course of the app in indecipherable writing. And I did this for a little while at the start, until the drawings get completely incomprehensible to anyone other than myself. And at that stage I realized I need to bring the team in and get some proper art developed. So with this app, and this was the first time we've done this in StoryToys, we actually storyboarded the entire app prior to any development. That's not even all of the storyboards. So you can see it was an extensive amount of work, and many might think for a 3D app an unnecessary one. However, because we were determined to make this app with minimum user interface, none if at all possible, and minimum dialogue, none if at all possible, we felt that storyboarding was the best way to both express what we wanted to do to third parties, but also just to decide what are we doing next. And in many cases, you can see the hula hoop here, or the record player. There were things that we did that were just stupid, and they didn't make it into the final app. So it's obviously a lot easier to storyboard these things than to go build them and then decide not to use them. And then my brilliant art director, Marco, sent me an email one night, and we knew how the caterpillar was going to look, we knew how the fruit was going to look, but how other objects in that universe were going to look, we had no clue. And I received this email from him, and he was basically saying that we'd been buying lots of Eric Carl products, and we had them around the office, and his wife just had a baby, so I had brought him some presents back from San Francisco, and he sends me an email saying, let's make everything out of paper or cardboard. Then it'll fit into that tiny universe, extend the world of Eric Carl, but we can have objects that are, something other than fruit and a caterpillar. So, I think I might I have a video here, but I think I might just quickly demo the app instead, because I think it's far more effective. So, as Warren said, it starts with an egg. And if you do nothing, the egg will wobble a little bit. If you do nothing for a long time, you'll get a little visual cue. Now, I've already run through this a couple of times, so my whole environment is unlocked. But when the child first goes in, there's nothing they can do except feed some fruit to the caterpillar. Plant some flowers for it. So while we'd hoped to have no user interface, we did feel that we at least needed to show when the caterpillar was full, when the caterpillar was happy, when he played enough. So we introduced these meters up the top here, but that's effectively the only UI in there. Every day you will want a new toy to play with. This is my favorite toy, because he doesn't really play with it. And so it goes. We have a painting area. In this, if I dip my fingers in paint, I'm leaving fingerprints. Or I can put blobs of paint. And we can either drag the caterpillar through them, or if we decide the caterpillar is just ruining our drawing continuously, we can just put him there and we can get on with our own drawing. We have a recently introduced, actually they're getting the caterpillar back. So in terms of caterpillar, I can pick him up, move him, or I can tap where I want him to go, or I can just navigate between the screens and he'll get there. We wanted to make sure that whatever way a kid felt it should work, that it works that way. So there's a lot of redundant means of getting your caterpillar to move around the place, but it just means kids can play with it in their own way. So this is effectively a music sequencer for children.
You guys, it's okay to clap if you see an amazing feature that deserves it. Because this is what wins the prize. It does something that nobody's done before.
Now, every time you come back to this screen, there's different random shapes there. So it's not the same experience every time. And also different music loops associated with those shapes.
And that would be the baby husky idea, that it's a surprise. You don't know what's going to be there. Unpredictability.
We have a little pond that you can sail around and get followed by little rubber ducks. But not a whole lot else, to be honest. You can see, if I move quickly, the environment reacts. I'll just pick up the iPad a second. It's all accelerometer driven. let me just give him one apple.
He's getting hungry.
Emmet, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
What platform did you use to make it?
It's Unity. I'll show you. I'll show the development environment in a little while. We put him to bed at the end of a hard day. And the next morning he'll be a little bit fatter and a little bit hungrier, and so it goes on. So I think that's enough of an overview of that. I'll just jump back to the slide deck here. So effectively, the development process was my awful scribbles to good storyboards to final art. So it might seem very linear, and in many ways it was quite linear. However, because we were going in with a strong prototype, it allowed us to iterate like crazy. We had, because we had our basic mechanics worked out from the start, we were able to take every little feature, every nuance of the app, and just hone it and hone it and hone it, and user test it until it felt exactly the way we wanted it to be. So, things like the caterpillar. I mean, looking at our first caterpillar that we presented now, I think it looks almost frightening. It's a big ominous shadow underneath, and it's beady little eyes. Versus the final drawing. I mean, and I'm showing three because they were the three I had on my hard drive. There were many, many other iterations. But in other areas, such as the sleeping, you can see in this version there's little things like the tree stump used to look a bit more like it was made from paper. You can see sort of white outlines. When he hopped into bed, little Zs came up from him. But again, considering the app from an international perspective, Z isn't maybe quite universal, and it just felt at odds with a lot of the other things that we were doing. So it was actually Matoko's feedback that led us to just using those little, nice little dots above the caterpillar that I think worked so well in the end. We had a big ugly pointer at one point in time that would show users exactly in a crudely Eric Carle style hand, crudely rendered Eric Carle style hand. Again, Matoko's guidance in that area was fantastic, where we eventually went for quite an abstract shape that came in much, much later in the process. It was a lot more let them figure it out rather than putting it in their face. The only thing that I actually really regret taking out, well, not regret taking out because it was necessary, but at one point in time, the fruit wasn't tied into the day-night cycle. So in the app now, you get, if you've eaten fruit, the next day you'll just get a little bit of fruit on the tree, and then the next day it'll be properly grown. Whereas we used to have it that any time you took fruit off the tree, we were trying to get trying to make it feel like stop motion when you see stop motion footage in an Attenborough documentary or something like that, where the things grew back very, very rapidly. It was cute, but it actually just didn't sit well with the rhythm of the game, and it just didn't quite work. But I did really like it, so I was sorry to see that go. So obviously making an app is making an app is the most important part of it, but there's lots of other things you have to consider too. Promotional artwork, your screen grabs, all of that kind of thing. And with that side of it, we went through just as many iterations as we did with the apps. We tried lots of different images, always took screen grabs of the App Store and sort of checked them out in context. What would look the best? What stands out the most? What fits with the app? I mean, it's always important that your feature art really just represents the core of your actual app. I think, we struggled for a while between which ones we should use, but eventually we decided a very large caterpillar on the screen was probably a good idea. And again, app icons. I mean, with app icons, it's so critical because everybody will see your icon, and a lot of purchase decisions are actually made based on the icon. So we tried lots of different options, and even did a level of A/B testing on them to see which were the ones more likely to be clicked on.
if we had lasers, it'd be great to let this group of experts pick which one you would think is best.
Sure. We really agonized over. I think A was never really a runner, but B and C was a hard choice.
Is the one you picked there?
It's the middle one. Well, we modified it a little bit further, but effectively the middle one is the one we used. And again, you test them in a number of different contexts. You know, see how it looks in the charts. See how it looks in any row of apps. Can you pick it out? And you know, as my first slide where I showed all the StoryToys icons indicated, icons tend to be pretty garish. They're all sort of screaming for attention, bright colors, and amazingly we felt actually when we put a white app on the App Store, it was like, wow, that really stands out. Nobody's using this color.
The other thing is, this is where the sensory motor thinking would come in. Think like a flashlight. What grabs your attention? What's shiny?
Yeah.
Because that's when you're in that kind of a...
Absolutely, and also not just what does it look at like, you know, on the App Store, what does it look like at every size? Does it still read? And I think one of the key reasons we went with this pose was it was just more reminiscent of the classic Eric Carle pose. So, I don't know if anyone's interested, but I was going to just show a little bit of what the development environment looks like. So we're using Unity, so the app is running at the moment. Unfortunately, the screen's not big enough that I can run the two simultaneously, but this is effectively the 3D environment. And one of the reasons that the white in the app works so well is it means we actually don't have to have a floor. So there's nothing for the caterpillar to collide with, and you know, I'm sure you've all seen in Unity games where elements mash together and the physics becomes less believable. We don't actually have to have any of that. We can just have an empty space with white displayed.
Did you consider dividing up into different scenes?
Well, it effectively is divided up into different scenes. So you can see along here, if I get out of the way, we have our camera setups. Yeah. So the different cameras effectively act as our different scenes. So you can see there's another couple up there. So effectively, when the caterpillar is in proximity of an area, the camera will automatically sort of snap to the scene. So it is essentially different scenes. However, we didn't want the lag of having to load and unload during play. And effectively, because all of the artwork is super optimized, very low polygon, which really worked with Eric's style, there's no load issues with running the whole thing as a single scene. So, I don't know if I can actually interact with it here. Let's see. No. I'd have to actually go play the part. But you can still get sort of a sense of it. So.
Did you make it all, or did you use some plugins for it?
I think the only thing, let's see, how many plugins? We have a cross-promotional bookshelf in it, and I think in that we might have used some additional plugins. But in terms of things like the paint area, I mean, we had to come up with new shaders for that, new blend modes. There's pretty deep new technology in it because effectively out of the box, Unity wasn't doing everything that we needed. Honestly, it's not that I'm opposed to plugins. If I could have saved us a bit of work, I would have jumped at it. But no, unfortunately, everything was pretty much from scratch. So there's, again, it's a similar team size across pretty much all StoryToys products. So it's 3 or 4 people on this one, and myself. We had a little bit longer than the 6 weeks we had for the first app, though. Well, I guess it was at the fair last year that we finally got greenlit, and we released in October. Was it mid October? Yeah, I think it was mid October release. So, but again, I think we put together the basic app, the basic feeding cycle very quickly, and then just gave ourselves a lot of time for polish, really, you know, and to really make it be the app that we want it to be. Also, I should say, on release, we didn't have the paint section and the music section. They were subsequently added as updates.
Well, nowadays, Monument Valley is very public, like disclose all your figures. Can you tell us how much, money-wise, how much you spend, how much you make?
How much was spent on the development of the app? Well, it's difficult to say without revealing too much, I guess. But effectively, I've stated it's 3.5 people for 4 months worth of salaries. So I wouldn't want to reveal what those people's salaries are, but particularly with this being recorded. But it was not a phenomenally expensive app to make. It was certainly.
We are serving wine at lunch.
It was mid-tier for StoryToys and certainly cheaper than anything I ever made in Houghton Mifflin.
Emmet,
Yeah.
do you ever find that your creativity was limited by the presentation community?
No, not really, because we'd always find a way, Ordinarily, almost every one of our the StoryToys products is developed in our own proprietary engine. And having your own engine is great because you can kind of get it to do whatever you want. However,
Was this your first Unity?
it was our second. We also did Animal Band. So, we kind of, the huge benefit to Unity is there is other people worrying about making the engine, so you don't have to have two engineers working on engine improvements while two are working on content. So honestly, as we go forward, I think we'll continue to do a mix, but at the moment we have 2 other products that we're developing in Unity and probably 3 that we're developing in our own engine. So I think a balance is important.
Can I ask about
Sure.
what's the difference between, what do you find is the difference between 2D and 3D in the sense that, do you do some games in 2D as well?
Loads in 2D, yeah.
2D.
Yeah.
So do you prefer 3D, or do you think in terms of telling a story, does it give you much more scope, or why did you choose?
So in terms of this one, I think it was, we felt that it drew people in more, and what we wanted to create was a deep and personal experience for a child. So every app I would take on a case-by-case basis, and 3D could have been a gimmick and could have been something that didn't actually enhance the content. But we wanted to, we wanted to sort of draw the user in and make them feel that there was lots of different areas to explore. I think in a way that we couldn't have done with 2D. Does that? Okay.
I was going to ask, what's the determining choice of university or
So Unity versus proprietary engine.
you said you was continuing.
Yeah. I think where we're doing something that's got a heavy game bias, then we use Unity. Whereas if it is an interactive storybook, then our engine does that a lot better than Unity ever will.
Quick question.
Sure.
What made you decide to drop the poem? Because I really love the poem, and the app works very well for kids who know the story, but I thought if a child does not know the book, it's kind of lost. And I kept tapping everywhere trying to find, how can I start?
So I guess, being very truthful, there were definitely licensing issues, but for this app, even if I had access to the full rights, I don't think it would have been the right choice, because I think then you would set it on a linear course, and it's a very non-linear app. So the app did very well. We were number one in iOS in over 30 countries, top 10 in overall iOS charts. But I guess what was really important to me was user feedback, and these are not our best reviews, but these are my 3 favorite. The first, because it's critical. The hardest part for her was figuring out the position of watering cans and getting Caterpillar off the sailboat. So as soon as we saw that review, we actually went and completely re-engineered how all of that stuff worked from scratch. So it is now, no matter what way you think the watering can should work, it works that way. Second review, my boys love it. My boys 4 and 5 love this game. Personally, I wish there was more to it. I keep waiting for it to be boring for them because of its repetitive nature. But 30 days in, this still hasn't happened. And I was reminded of me as a frustrated father on day 400, reading the books to my children. I was like, well, great, we've managed to achieve the same sort of simplicity but resonance. So we were happy with that one. And then this last one, I'm 7 and this is still one of my favorite apps I've had yet. Always growing. We did a Christmas version, I won't show you that now, but again, that was where we introduced the paint section. And there was just one other thing I was going to demo a little bit of, and that is what comes next. So let me pull that up here, because again, it's better as an interactive.
I think we're going to see something that no one's seen.
That's true. World premiere. So we've introduced balloons. So you can still sort of navigate around and your Caterpillar will sort of float about with you. We have a lot more flowers, a lot of different varieties, and the user can actually choose, there's multiple seeds, so if they just want to grow sunflowers, they can just grow sunflowers. If they just want to grow any type of flower, they can just grow any type of flower. Let me, oh yeah, there we go. So if I decide to pop a balloon, he'll still walk around with a couple of balloons attached to him. Ooh, what's in this picnic basket? Another very heavily requested feature. And then, as I guess I alluded to earlier, the pond was never really my favorite part. So there's a lot more going on at the pond now. Forgive the audio on this. This is a work in progress version, so we have an awful sound effect. But every day they dig up a treasure chest and they get something new in it. So when they go in at first, the pond has nothing in it, and then they'll earn a duck, they'll earn a firefly. Okay, he's still eating his food. Come on. And we had to completely re-engineer the water, but now you can see when you tap on water, you get a nice ripple. The fireflies, we can turn those on and off. We have dragonflies wandering around as well. And let me try and catch a fish. Maybe like a coconut. So that's it. That's the that's effectively the new version that we're working on. Yeah, thanks for listening, guys.